Welcome to the Real Boardloft. I'm Trip Forman. We have with us again Jake Sachs, and for those of you that remember, Jake helped us out with the review on the Lost Party Crasher, and well, I made a little mistake. Matt Biola sent me my own personal Mayhem Lost Hydra, which is the board we're going to be talking about today. Matt sends me this board. I pull it out. I look at it. I'm freaking out. Jake walks in. Jake says, hey, can I take that out? I'm going out surfing right now. I was like, oh, definitely. I put the pad on it. I get him hooked up with the fins. What happens?
I never returned it.
Doesn't bring the board back. So Jake, tell us about the Hydra.
Yeah, I immediately saw it. I loved it. I wanted to give it a try. It is a great small wave board. It fills that just small wave groveler when you want to go really fast. It also, I pushed the limits of it a little bit into some, chest, shoulder high surf, and it held its ground, but definitely more of a groveler. It's got this awesome chine. I don't know if you can see that in the video, but it's got a bottom rail chine. So you have something that will get into waves early and get your speed down the line, but you can still lay it on rail. It's not like you're fighting it. It doesn't feel like a tugboat where you're just like plowing through the water straight down the line. And on a few of the waves that we were riding, I was able to actually get like multiple cutbacks to the power source, and then kind of pump into the next section. And so it was really fun to be able to like throw it on rail, get back to the peak, and then pump down the line, throw it on rail, get back to the peak. And so yeah, just a great little board.
Jake, like looking at this board, obviously it's a groveler, right? So it's like it's meant for like the low, like maximum low end. But when I look at this thing, like I look at the Hydra, a lot of grovelers are just size, like super wide, super thick, super flat. They're getting that power, like that underfoot, like kind of horsepower, just from like the overall size of the board. Like where I look at this one kind of looks more of a combination of size times science. Yeah. Like size times design. And, because a lot of those boards, like, yeah, they'll get up and going, but they're going to get up and go and like hit a top end. Where this board, like it just didn't feel like when I actually got it back from you and got a chance to surf it, it just didn't feel like it was as limited as the top end, because when you look at it, it like doesn't look gigantic like in any kind of dimension. It's more of a combination of like what horsepower it has with also kind of minimizing drag as well. Yeah,
Lost did an amazing job of keeping the width through the midsection, the parallel rail outline, but then pulling in the nose and pulling in the tail just enough. It's still got a really wide tail, but pulling it in just enough. It's got these this awesome hip here, and it's almost kind of like in cut, and then it just goes to a straight outline, like just back from the fins. So it really dives narrow back around the tail, and then you have the tail with the really sharp edges, this kind of split diamond tail that helps, all of that helps control the tail while still projecting you forward with the width of the tail.
Yeah, I mean, because in small waves, if you're a Grom in small waves, like I was watching a session at the Lighthouse, those guys and girls, they just go fast all the time anyway. They're just like all over the place. Yeah. But if you're a normal size human being that works and has a paycheck and all these other things that kind of make you larger as you go in life, anything that's helping you generate speed is actually going to help you generate fun in small waves. And like that was the thing I noticed about the Hydra, is that how much speed it projects, like how fast you can get going in waves that don't actually have any power. Yeah. Looking at it, like what I'm guessing it's from is like the parallel outline, just the drive out of that outline, and then the tail, like having that much width underneath the underneath your back foot. Like the bigger that tail block is, like the more power.
Yeah, the more water you're displacing, which pushes you forward. And one bottom turn to just a good pump would light it up And then, you know, normally with a fish, you'd be like just flowing down the line and gaining speed that way. But I actually felt like on this one, you'd get one good pump, and then if you laid into a turn, it would keep the power through the rail turn as well, and keep it going. So there wasn't like that stop, go kind of feeling.
Yeah.
It had the more fluid moment. I think that's because of that rail chine, you know, and the tail with the V coming out the bottom, being able to get it onto the rail and off the rail without it like bogging it all.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing, like, because you can make a board that like just goes ultra fast and just goes like right out of the frame, like but it never comes back in the frame, like, you know, the mysterious like 75-yard long roundhouse.
Right.
But where this thing kind of differed from that board is that chine helps you get it on rail. Like what you were talking about, like the side cut that's in this section right here.
Yeah.
Like that the hip right here, and then almost like a side cut like you would see like on the swordfish or on the pelagic fish in the back to hook it. So you got that to lay it, and then you got that to hook it at the end of the turn. And then also like the split in the tail, that split diamond, just to relieve a little bit of pressure, just so it didn't get so overpowered that you actually had a check turn before you actually turn. What did you think as far as like, you know, if you've got a predominantly like lost quiver, how does this board compare to like the puddle jumper, the swordfish that we just mentioned, you know, those
puddle
sort of boards? Like
HP.
where does this thing fit in?
I would say if you have a puddle jumper HP or kind of hybrid shortboard, small wave shortboard, this would fit as your groveler, just your go-to, like almost like the beanbag, lost beanbag, or just a good groveler that you can still rip on. As far as the puddle jumper, I think it has more low end than a puddle jumper, so you can grovel a little lower, but you still have the upper end as well. Like I was able to put it into some shoulder high sets, and it held just fine. It felt good. It felt like I did spin it out a couple times on some bigger.
Where did you get
sets.
scared?
I got scared.
Did you ever get scared on this board?
I never got scared, but I definitely had to get in the back seat on it a couple times.
Okay, like where did you get like on the edge of control?
About like just over shoulder high.
Okay, good.
Yeah, just over.
That's actually a good thing. Like because a lot of these boards are made like, oh well, you can ride it from like 1 foot to like 12 foot. You know, like it's actually in a groveler like this. If you're actually trying to make a really good groveler, it's good to get like overpowered, like where you're like, oh shit. Like actually I got like too much power, like I gotta like go to my other board. Like that's actually a good thing, because that's what makes the board so much fun in surf this size.
Yeah.
What about fins? What were you riding on the fins?
I rode it with these FCS2 split keels from Mayhem, and they were sick. This is definitely the fin I would recommend for this board. I also rode it with some smaller, just normal quad set, and it felt a lot looser, a lot skatier, which if you like that feeling, that's cool. You can always throw that in there, especially on smaller days. If you really want to throw the tail and kind of get it to spin and get loose with it, you can throw some smaller fins in it. But just for everyday grabbing it and being able to really depend on it in a variety of wave heights, I'd go with the split keels.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, I mean, you look at this board, so, you know, a lot of boards in this category, they're set up 5 fins so that you don't have to like commit one way or another. But when you have a board that's this wide with this type of design, like it's definitely quad, you know, so they don't even put a center box in it. Like I found the split keels to work. That was like my favorite setup on it, you know, like some sort of, you know, depending on the boxes that you have, either split keels, or you could have, like if it was futures, like you could have controllers in there. The board has more than enough width to balance like that fin template, so it doesn't feel like too tracky. But you just get so much more drive and like down the line speed out of it, which is again like what you're trying to do in that stuff, is just generate speed. So the last thing we want to talk about is construction on these boards, on the Hydras, and they're available in standard, lost, PU, poly. You know, also a good board to look at if you're thinking about an alternative tech. This board is C4, so it's the cork carbon composite, which makes the board lighter and gives it a little bit more flex and response out of the turns. Also the carbon wrap would be a good one on this board. You know, in your groveler, if you're open to alternative techs, having a board that's a little bit lighter and a little bit more flex in that groveler always pays off a little bit. So, you know, even something like, you know, if you're going custom and you're not you're not like freaked out by like heel dents in the board, even going to a lighter glass schedule on a board like this is smart, you know, because again, like all that extra response gets turned into speed down the line, which equals fun. But if you want to go standard PU poly, that's also an option on this board, and it's going to make the board perform really well. Also, the last thing on this board, while we got it out, is making sure that you choose the right tail pad. With how wide that tail is, you want to make sure that you go with a wide tail pad. This is one of the wider pads from Creatures. You don't want to be putting like your shortboard pad like all stranded in the middle of the board, like it'd be like a, you know, like a super tiny little postage stamp of a tail pad on this giant tail. So you want to have something that's got a real wide tail block on it and kind of fills out that space in the tail. So any last comments on it, Jake?
It's just really fun, really fast, and you can still get it on rail, which is kind of everything you want in a groveler. So I'd fully recommend it.
Awesome. Well, hey, if we want to thank everyone for joining us. If you have any questions on the new Lost Hydra, or you want to get an order placed for one, either for one of the stock boards that we have or placing a custom order, you can give us a call at 252-987-6000, or you can look us up online, realwatersports.com/surfing. Thanks for